when you're poorly slept, it's really hard to function. It's hard to manage stress, which can render us at greater risk for things like anxiety, depression. And of course, having anxiety or depression can also interfere with our sleep. So there can be this real vicious cycle that ensues between our sleep and mental health as well as our physical health.
Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello, everyone. Today's guest is the wonderful Dr. Wendy Troxel, and we're here today to talk about sleep, but from a perspective that may surprise you and intrigue you at the same time. I hope so. I'm feeling very much like that myself. We know that sleep is a cornerstone of our well-being, our mental health, our vitality, our happiness. And of course, when it comes to anxiety, we know that not enough sleep can really amplify anxiety, but we also know that anxiety can obviously interfere with sleep, falling asleep and having really good quality sleep. And if we live to 75, we will have slept around 25 years. And that's if we're lucky enough to sleep around 8 hours a night. And I've taken this information from the lovely Dr. Troxel's website. And so, yeah, it's a really big part of our lives, and it's something we really need to focus on when it comes to our overall well-being. So today's guest, Dr. Wendy Troxel, is a behavioural sleep medicine specialist. So in addition to her expertise as both a sleep medicine academic and her clinical work, she's the associate editor for two highly respected journals, Sleep Health and Behavioural Sleep Medicine. She also serves, I don't know when she sleeps, by the way, she also serves on the National Institutes of Health Sleep Disorders Research Advisory Board and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine Task Force on Behavioural Treatments for Insomnia. She also works for the RAND Corporation, a not-for-profit research organisation committed to bettering community health. And she's the author of Sharing the Covers, Every Couple's Guide to Better Sleep. And it's obvious, isn't it? Our sleep is very much influenced by who we share the bed with. And I know a lot of people like me share a bed with a partner. Some people share the bed with their children. Others have the luxury of sleeping alone, which is very nice. So, Dr. Wendy Troxel, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your incredible expertise.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and for that lovely introduction. I'm really happy to be here with you and your guests.
Oh, it's just lovely to have you with us all the way from Utah. So it's in the evening there overseas, and it's early morning here. So my kids will be up and about soon. So let's see how that goes. So, could you tell us, please? Could you start by telling us, please, why is our sleep so important?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, sleep is really a cornerstone, not only of our mental health, but also our physical health, our relationship health, our productivity, and it's even essential for our survival. And yet, it is this fundamental biological need, just like our need for food or water. And yet, it is the one biological need that we as a culture will routinely sacrifice for the demands of living, or, just because we don't think it's that important. And that is really a mortally flawed belief, this idea that you can sleep when you're dead. Well, no. In fact, sleeping less than the optimal, which is around 7 to 9 hours of sleep for most adults, children and adolescents need more. But that is a really good way to march yourself towards early death or early disease risk and a poor quality of life along the way. I think everybody knows that when you're poorly slept, it's really hard to function. It's hard to manage stress, which can render us at greater risk for things like anxiety, depression. And of course, having anxiety or depression can also interfere with our sleep. So there can be this real vicious cycle that ensues between our sleep and mental health as well as our physical health.
Thank you for painting that picture for us, because you're exactly right. It is something that is dismissed easily as being something that can be postponed or sacrificed. And I think it possibly relates to a lack of really deep understanding of just how important it is. And you've started to help us to understand more about, just from the surface level, we know if we don't sleep well, we get a bit grumpy, we're a bit more reactive. I know if I don't sleep well, it is disastrous for my own anxiety. And so having this time with you today is so special because, particularly, I think different age groups, like you say, have different sleep needs. And I think you'd probably have some insights for us into how our sleep is affected by various things like technology. But today, really, what I want to focus on is how our sleep is affected by the other people that we share the covers with, which is the title of your incredible book. And so, what can you tell us about the impact of other people on our sleep and why you were prompted to actually write a book about this to really support the community?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, the reality is, as you mentioned, that we spend about a third of our lives asleep, if we're lucky, and we get the 7 to 9 hours, 9 hours of sleep that's recommended. And for most adults, that critical health behavior in that large proportion of time is shared with another human being, our partner, sometimes our children as well, or our pets. But our partner is really, for most adults do share a bed, at least at some point in their lives, with another human being. And yet, sleep research, which is a relatively young science, actually, it's only been around for about 70 years. Throughout that history of sleep research, the science has really viewed sleep at the level of the individual. So it's kind of no wonder that we as a society also have neglected to consider the shared or coupled nature of sleep because, science has done the same. They've really focused on sleep as this isolated individual behavior. And when I began my research career in this area about 20 years ago, it was out of an interest first in studying couples and why relationships matter for health. And then I really stumbled upon sleep because I realized, wow, sleep is this critically important health behavior that we know is associated with all of these long term and short term mental and physical health consequences. And it happens to be the one health behavior, more so than diet or physical activity, that human beings regularly share with a partner. And yet no one was studying it in the social context in which it occurs. So it became immediately fascinating to me to understand both kind of the mysteries of both sleep and love and human relationships and how they intertwine. And what my research and others over the past 20 years has shown, and which I discuss at length in my book, hopefully in a very translatable way, is just how interconnected our sleep and our closest relationships are. So when we're poorly slept, we as ourselves aren't the only ones to suffer. Our relationships can suffer as well because science shows us that there are direct impacts of sleep loss on our sort of basic social behaviors as well as our mood and our risk for mental health problems like depression and anxiety, which can also have negative impacts on relationships. So, and again, I'm sure everybody is sort of aware of this. When you're poorly slept, yes, you are more irritable, whether you recognize it or not. Others around you do, and they're often bearing the brunt of it. You're also, your frustration tolerance lowers under sleep deprived conditions, and you're less able to regulate your emotions. So you're more prone to conflict. And when you engage in conflict, we conducted one laboratory study where we showed that people who were poorly slept and who were instructed in the context of a sort of a typical relationship task that we engage in, have couples engage in the laboratory. So all couples engage in a conflict. They're told to talk about a typical conflict they have. But the couples who were poorly slept engaged in a conflict in kind of the most toxic, hostile ways. So, what any relationship therapist will tell you about relationships is that, all relationships have some level of conflict. So, it's not just having conflict that matters, it's how you engage in it that matters for the health of your relationship. And what my research has shown is that when you're sleep deprived, you're more likely to engage in those really unhealthy behaviors that can turn a normal marital or relationship conflict into something very toxic and that can escalate and cause real harm to your relationship.
I can see how that can happen. And I'm sort of chuckling. I'm trying not to chuckle out loud so I didn't interrupt you. But when I when I look at Peter and I have been together since we were 19. We've been together. We're nearly 49 next year. He'll hate me saying that. Sorry, Pete. I think he really likes to think he's still, late 20s.
Of course.
But but I think about like it's so interesting because I live with anxiety, and he understands so much about it. He knows how important it is for me to get good sleep, and yet my chronotype puts me as a night owl. And so, but of course, when even if you're a night owl, your alarm still goes off at 7 o'clock the next morning to get ready for, taking kids to school and so on. So our I realize how much he helps protect my sleep through his behaviors and his conversations, because we'll sit here next to where we're recording in the lounge of an evening and maybe get 1 hour of TV after everything's done, and that's how we unwind. And then I'll be like, just one more episode, and he's like, no, I think it's, even last night he stopped it halfway through. I think it's time to head to bed, he said, because I'd been out presenting and it was already quite late. And I'm thankful to him for that, for helping protect my sleep, because I guess he knows it's in his best interests.
Well, it's a really good point, and actually, that is a chapter in my book that I hope you resonated with you, called "Are We in Sync?" That for couples who are mismatched in terms of their sleep wake preferences. Some people are naturally more morning people. Some people are naturally more evening people, and sometimes they pair together, and sometimes conflict can ensue. But couples can also really make the most of it, and couples supporting each other in following healthy sleep behaviors, including following a pretty regular bedtime routine, is one of the ways that relationships can be health protective. Now, I do want to mention, it sounds like what your husband is doing is in fact health protective and helping you, sort of recognizing that your sleep and prioritizing your sleep is one of the ways that you maintain your wellness. What I have seen sometimes clinically when couples come into to me and I see an extreme night owl paired with an extreme morning person is sometimes one partner, and it's typically the night owl, kind of gets yanked along for the ride on the morning person's schedule. And asking someone, an extreme night owl, to go to bed at 10 p.m. when their biological clock tells them they're not ready is actually a surefire strategy for that person to then experience insomnia, because you can't just will yourself to sleep if your internal biological clock tells you you're not ready. So I often see couples that struggle with this issue of being mismatched. In that case, what I sort of recommend is, yes, we as partners can really be good sort of health behavior facilitators towards our partner, and that can be reciprocated. It's a great way to produce health in the context of a relationship. But it's important to know that our intrinsic sleep wake patterns are largely genetically derived. And though we live in a culture that tends to make morningness a virtue, and everything is set based on morning people's schedules, it's really hard to change people's intrinsic rhythms. So making sure that both partners are sensitive to these intrinsic differences and then sort of gently guiding each other towards maybe finding middle ground, or maybe it's that he says goodnight a little bit earlier, reminds you, maybe you don't want to watch a full another episode, given that you do have to wake up in the morning. So finding that middle ground.
It's so interesting as I think about once we do go to bed. I love to read, and that's a really lovely way that I wind down. In fact, we both will read, but he has a Kindle, so he'll always sort of shut that down and just say goodnight and roll, and I'm just left reading on my own. And that's how I kind of wind myself down, and I could read there for another half an hour to an hour, and then when I'm ready I will turn off my little book light and snuggle down for the evening. So it's so interesting that it's a real buffer against me just sort of sitting up and being more alert from watching a program. But once we actually hit the bed, it's very much, all right, well, you're much more tired than I am. I'm not ready. And so it is. It's so great to have these insights into what our patterns are. That's so important.
Yes, and and again, what he's doing, he's sort of cueing you that, okay, now's the time to begin that, like, the real bedtime wind down, which for you is the reading, and to avoid what's very common these days of bedtime procrastination, where our only me time ends up coming in the morning hours or late at night, sacrificing our sleep, which again doesn't end up being self care. So he is with that sort of gentle reminder that bedtime is here. He might be able to fall asleep quickly as soon as he gets to bed, but you still need that extra time because biologically, you're just prone to stay up later. And so you need that sort of extra support. And that's a great way that couples can actually support each other and recognize their differences, but support each other. And again, in my book, I actually have a simple questionnaire for couples to fill out together so they can each identify their sleep wake preferences. Are you more of a morning lark, or more of an evening owl? And how do you both match up or not match up? And if you don't match up, then it's about maximizing and problem solving to use your differences to your favor. In fact, I've known couples that are extreme mismatched pairs, and it's actually a wonderful thing when having children, because let's say the husband is a night owl. Well, he's sort of naturally designed to do some of those evening caretaking responsibilities, while his partner gets to sleep early in the night, if she is more of a morning person and naturally is going to wake up in the morning. So there could actually be an evolutionary basis to support some couples being mismatched if you use it to your advantage.
Yes, and it's the first step is understanding and reflecting. And I know already this far into the podcast, listeners will be starting to think, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. That explains that. And of course we'll come to some suggestions for what people can do. But I know of, some people will just separate, go into different bedrooms. And so could you talk to us about what are some of the, I mean, I think of snoring for one, that will really interfere with sleep for the partner that is having to lie there and listen to that. But what are some of the other? So we've talked about the chronotype and kind of what your patterns are naturally. But what are some of the other things that really interfere with sleep when it comes to sharing the covers?
Yeah, so there's actually lots of things that can interfere with the shared sleep experience, and also lots of strategies for overcoming them, sleeping apart being just one of them. Now, I get asked to comment about this all the time because the media is hyper focused on this concept of sleep divorce, which is not a term I like at all because it's so judgmental and has such a negative connotation. But yes, there is a sort of growing trend for couples to choose to sleep apart, and for many reasons. And I've talked to all sorts of couples, many very happily married long term couples who choose to sleep apart. The reasons could range from, yes, snoring is the major culprit. One partner just cannot sleep because um, a partner is snoring so loudly, it sounds like a freight train coming through the room. But there's other reasons as well. Maybe it's young children, maybe it's nighttime caregiving responsibilities. And so some couples choose, well, instead of us both not sleeping, at least for a time in our family's life, it might make sense, or even part of the week, to sleep apart so one partner can actually get a solid night of sleep. You'll be amazed what that does, to avoid that cumulative sleep debt that can grow, particularly when you have, infants or young children. So children can play a role. Other, sleep problems or sleep just habits and preferences. Maybe one person has insomnia, or just is a light sleeper and is disturbed by the slightest movements. Maybe one partner is a sheet stealer, or there might be differences in temperature preferences, or sort of or sleep wake schedules, either because of intrinsic rhythms, as we discussed, or maybe one partner, works night shifts, and the other partner is awake, works during the day, or just is awake for the children during the day. So there's lots of reasons why, there isn't always perfect harmony in the bedroom when it comes to sleep. And I want to let couples know that that is really okay. It doesn't have to mean anything negative about your relationship. Just as couples of all types face all types of challenges during the daytime, so too do we as couples face challenges at night. And there's lots of strategies to overcome them, whether it be sleeping apart, whether it be sleeping apart on some sort of temporary basis, whether it be treating a sleep disorder, that's a really important thing to do, or other practical strategies like using eye masks or earplugs, or in the case of different sleep wake schedules, really optimizing sort of the times where you guys both are going to be at your peak in terms of alertness and energy. Really allowing permission for partners to go to bed and wake up at different times, but finding ways to not disturb the other partner if on differing schedules. So lots of strategies to try.
It's so great that you're able to mention so many different ways that people can make adjustments. And I just can't help coming back to these different the ways Pete and I are just on very different schedules. And that, I have a reputation for being a little bit hard to get out of bed and a bit grumpy in the morning, but I don't agree with that, to be quite honest. I actually think I do a really good job considering. I mean, I used to sing.
Considering that it's not your natural time for alertness or mood or energy. You really are working against your intrinsic biological rhythm. So it does take you a greater sort of response. You have to mount more of a response just to be pleasant in the morning. Whereas a morning person wakes up bright eyed and bushy tailed.
Yes, I always wanted. When I first did my chronotype, I did it under the guidance of Dr. Christy Goodwin, another beautiful guest. And I said to her, I just wanted to be a lark. I knew I wouldn't be. I knew naturally. I think we kind of have a bit of an inkling, don't we? Or we know clearly. But one of the things that you touched on earlier was insomnia. How do you support people who just really have so much trouble sleeping?
Yes, insomnia is in fact the most common sleep disorder. And just to briefly describe it, what it consists of is the difficulty either falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep, or just the feeling that your sleep is chronically unrefreshing or unrestorative, and is associated with some form of daytime impairment, be that problems with memory or mood or concentration, some sort of like negative daytime consequence. And it's shockingly prevalent. The good news is that effective treatments do exist for insomnia, but what most people aren't aware of is the most effective treatment for insomnia does not come in the form of a pill. In fact, study after study has shown that the most effective and enduring treatment for insomnia is actually a behavioral one, and it's called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI for short. It's the type of treatment I provide in my clinic. There's now multiple modalities of delivery of CBTI, including free app-based versions, as well as group therapy, teletherapy. So there are resources out there. And just briefly, what it focuses on is changing specific thoughts and behaviors around sleep that really people end up developing over nights and nights and nights of successive problems with sleep. That these thoughts and behaviors are originally designed to kind of cope with the sleep problem, but unfortunately they end up perpetuating the problem. So for an example, someone who is struggling nightly to sleep will start doing things like going to bed earlier, because they'll naturally think to themselves, and intuitively, I get it, it makes sense. Oh, well, I need to go to bed earlier, because if you're calculating, well, it takes me 2 hours to fall asleep and I'm going to be up 2 hours in the middle of the night, I better extend that window of opportunity for sleep just so I can get, a bare minimum. But unfortunately, that sort of expecting the worst and behaviorally increasing the opportunity for sleep while still not achieving good sleep, that actually ends up exacerbating and perpetuating the problem. So, one of the first strategies of CBTI is to actually restrict the opportunity for sleep, so the natural drive for sleep grows more strong. So it's in many ways a paradoxical treatment that doesn't come to people naturally, and it's really best conducted in the context of a comprehensive behavioral sleep treatment, not just, one off. Or people also often tell me, because they'll misinterpret, that sleep hygiene is the same thing as effective sleep treatment. They are not the same. Sleep hygiene, things like having a comfortable sleep room in terms of sound, temperature, and darkness. Those are all really important for healthy sleep, but that does not constitute a treatment itself. CBTI is an evidence based treatment for insomnia that's been proven to be as effective and more enduring and without the side effects of any sleep medication on the market.
Oh, and speaking of sleep medication, melatonin is something that is so popularly used to aid sleep. And it's a medication here in Australia that you need a prescription for unless you are older. And I'm not sure if that's 55 or 65, in which case you can talk to the pharmacist and be given, some melatonin over the counter if you're in that age group and can prove that you are. Could you please share with us the impact of relying on a medication like melatonin day in, day out for sleep and what effect that can have over the long term?
Sure. Well, with regard to melatonin specifically, and first of all, cheers to Australia for at least regulating melatonin. In the US, melatonin is not sold as a prescribed substance. You can go to your grocery store and get melatonin. And also, kudos to Australia for the fact that there's an age restriction actually is consistent with the data on the effectiveness of melatonin. There, in fact, is no data to suggest that people, younger than, I believe, 65, or maybe it's 55, achieve any benefit for sleep when taking melatonin. There's some benefit among older adults because our melatonin levels naturally fall, our natural production of melatonin falls as we age. But among younger ages, the evidence does not indicate that melatonin is effective as a sleep aid. And in fact, it was never intended to be a sleep aid. Melatonin is known as a chronobiotic, which means a time shifter. And like I said, our bodies naturally produce melatonin. And what melatonin does when it's naturally produced is it signals to the brain that it's time for sleep. And that goes along with dim light conditions. So as the light falls and melatonin is stimulated. That's why it's called the hormone of darkness. Melatonin could also be suppressed by light exposure. And that's why one of the reasons why we recommend avoiding technology at night. So melatonin is naturally produced. When melatonin is effective as in pill form, it's as a chronobiotic, means to shift one's time schedule. So it is in fact effective, for instance, for treating jet lag or for people adjusting to shift work schedules. But it is not effective taking it nightly at bedtime to help you sleep. Moreover, you know, there are concerns, and I feel very strongly about this, particularly when I see melatonin being given to children and adolescents. Melatonin is a hormone that your body naturally produces. Melatonin in pill form often comes in supraphysiologic doses above 3 milligrams, and there's no evidence that melatonin doses above 3 milligrams does any benefit, and that's so much higher than the amount that our bodies naturally produce. So really think about that and have some pause over the idea of putting in your body, particularly a developing body, a hormone at a super high level that your body naturally produces, for which there's no evidence that it actually does what you're hoping it will do. So I would really say, when it comes to melatonin, if you're going to use it, it should be for short-term use only, and it should really be used for, the purpose it was intended for instance, for shifting time zones. When it comes to other sleep medications, I have similar words of caution. Sometimes there is a time and a place, short term, for sleep medications, but they do not replace naturalistic sleep. Studies have clearly demonstrated that, nor do they extend sleep by significant amounts. And there are side effects of long term use. So, if you're really struggling with sleep, it's important to first get to the root of the problem, find out what the cause is. Is it insomnia? Is it obstructive sleep apnea? Is it one of the many, many other sleep disorders like narcolepsy or hypersomnia that exist and people are just not aware of? Get to the root of the problem and then find the most evidence based treatment, which is often a behavioral one, not a pharmacologic one.
Now, how do people start by trying to understand more about their sleep and what is at the root of the problem?
It's a great question. I mean, I have some exercises in my book, for instance, to do in the context of relationships, to do a sleep diary, as well as a relationship diary, even just to start to see the patterns, how your sleep relates to how you function in your relationship, because that can be, really elucidating if you're not aware of how sleep affects you. Just looking at the patterning of your sleep over time is a great way to get an assessment of how regular your sleep is, because our bodies and our brains really do respond best and we sleep most healthfully when under conditions of regularity and predictability. So you can look at a sleep diary and see how variable is your sleep schedule. Am I waking up a lot in the middle of the night? Is it taking me, hours to fall asleep? Do I wake up feeling unrefreshed or really lethargic? Or am I needing to take naps during the day? This kind of daily tracking of your sleep, which again, you can do on a simple paper and pencil diary like I provide in my book, does not have to be done with any sort of sleep tracker. Um, this can give you a sense of the patterning of your sleep and then identify potential issues. And what I want to tell everybody is, we all have a bad night of sleep here or there. So, good quality sleep is not, doesn't consist of one night alone, nor does, a sleep disorder consist of one night alone. So really look at the patterning of your sleep across a 2 week period, and really then assess, oh, is it taking me hours to fall asleep, or am I up hours in the middle of the night? Because sleep is also a dynamic state. So it's normal to have some awakenings, and it's also normal to take a little bit of time to fall asleep. Typically less than a half hour is considered totally normal. And then really pay attention to how you're feeling during the daytime. That's a great indicator of how the quality of the sleep you're getting. And then start to think first about some basic strategies like regularizing your sleep wake schedule. Start with a consistent morning routine, is what I tell everyone. See sort of if you get any traction with that. If not, then you may think, okay, how long has this been lasting? Maybe I do need to speak to a provider about this if I have an actual sleep problem. And following other sort of basic sleep health strategies is a great way to learn to optimize your sleep based on understanding your own data.
Mm. Yes, it's those insights, isn't it? That when we know what we're dealing with, and then you approach somebody for help, and you're already ahead of the game and closer to getting the help that's appropriate for the challenges that you're facing, because you've got the evidence to be able to sort of pass on to the practitioner to say, this is what I'm living with, this is what I'm experiencing. So, um, when it comes to sharing the covers, what do you at what point should couples seek that help themselves? What are some of the things that couples can do? When you mentioned so many different reasons earlier that will impact its temperature, light, noise, sleep cycles, snoring, wakefulness, those sorts of things. What are some of the things? I guess the first thing is a conversation, isn't it? To sort of like you said earlier, have that conversation and start to really become aware of what each other's needs are and what's causing the impact. What are some next steps that couples? Because there might be people listening who are just going, "Oh my gosh, I've never," because some people would sacrifice sleep to stay in the bedroom with the partner, and I'd love to really support people who are struggling with their sleep to be able to make a couple of practical changes that might make a really meaningful difference.
Absolutely. And and again, my book is sort of meant to be sort of the gateway to have this conversation.
Yes.
It's the starter. And it's done in a way I hope that really encourages it to be sort of fun and interesting and not at all threatening for couples. These are exercises and strategies for couples to do together to start the conversation about their sleep, about their expectations and values around the marital bed, where that came from, and to really sort of start with an open slate and a way to have a conversation in a very non-threatening and way that can really facilitate open and honest conversation and also problem solving. Then beyond that, there are couples who absolutely could benefit from an actual intervention or actual help from an expert. And I can only say, in my experience, when couples come to me, it typically occurs because they're at an impasse. They get to a point, for instance, where at the crux, at least one partner is just not sleeping and they are desperate, and they know at least that it's affecting their relationship, and yet they haven't been able to see eye to eye on how to get past this impasse. And maybe it often is the case that the person that's desperate for sleep is willing to try anything, including sleeping apart or just anything, and the other partner is really tied to this is how we sleep, and this is we're going to go to bed at the same time, we're going to wake up at the same time, because this is what couples do. And I really understand that, because we have all of this sort of cultural belief around the marital bed, and that's really firmly entrenched. And it's hard for people to even sort of see shades of that. So it's very black and white thinking when it comes to the marital bed. So when they come to me, it's often at this impasse where they both are struggling, they're unhappy, but they can't see eye to eye. And one of the things that, what I do as the clinician is to really first recognize and help them identify, their need for sleep, how they experience the consequences of sleep loss, how it impacts each other. And first identify, okay, sleep is an us problem if it's not going well, and then to really start introducing the shades of gray, that it doesn't have to be this black and white thinking of like, either we're sleeping together every night, all night, or we're never sleeping together ever again and the relationship will fall apart. Sometimes it's even about opening the door to the conversation of, wow, your partner is really struggling with sleep right now because she's in the midst of a intense insomnia episode. What if we focused on treating the insomnia now, and maybe part of the week you all sleep apart, but then reconvene on the weekend. Sometimes just exploring the idea that different sleeping strategies can be more of an experiment, and then we come back and we have data on it to then reflect on and say, because often it happens, one partner might be completely convinced that it's the other partner that's causing the sleep problem, and then she might find out, oh, my insomnia exists whether or not my partner is sleeping with me. There must be other causes. So then we work for those other causes. So it's about sort of using data and being open to the idea of experimenting in the light of problem solving towards a mutually reinforcing goal, that this is really about us and finding ways for us to be stronger as a couple, not making any sort of lasting or enduring changes that are going to be uncomfortable for either one. But sometimes it's about, okay, can we explore this possibility? It doesn't have to be the be all end all, but it's just opening up the door to see, does this actually have benefits that we didn't realize could be there, as well as potential, if there are consequences, we also learn about that. But it's about being willing to experiment and try in the vein of problem solving.
Yes, and that curiosity, I think it's a really nice, gentle approach, isn't it? Just let's just become curious and start to understand a little bit more. And like you say, do our own little experiments and see what happens. And oh, there's so much to talk about when it comes to this aspect of sleep that I mean, I'd fallen trap, I think, to what the research had always been focused on, which is what you talked about at the start, which is that we think about it from an individual point of view. And from this day forward, I will think about it very differently, and I'll be able to talk to people about it differently as well. And once people are listening to our episode, I think there are going to be a lot of light bulbs. One last question, if I may, before we part ways. Speaking of sleep, I think that it's after 8 o'clock, and I think my children are probably still asleep. But that's okay. We'll just rally and motor to get to school because I don't want to miss the opportunity to ask this question. Uh, do you have suggestions for couples or parents that have children in their bed every night?
That's a tough one. Again, a whole
Yeah.
code to that.
Yeah.
um, is this is a family level decision. And where I see problems, again, when couples come to me, is there is, the couple might come in seemingly completely on the same page of, having the same goals, but the differences between the two can be distilled down to just a few words. So one partner might say to me when I ask, so what is your goal for your child? One partner may say, I just want my child to sleep through the night. And the other partner says, I just want my child to sleep through the night in her own bed. Those four extra words are qualitatively different, and it matters because the difference between those two goals are vastly different, and how you go about it is vastly different. And it's unfair to a child to be inconsistent in your approach. Children will adapt to a lot of things, and I happen to be a sleep doctor who really believes family bedding and choices around bedding. That's really a family value decision. And of course, you must do it safely. You should recognize there is research to show that children, yes, generally do sleep better when sleeping in their own beds. But there's lots of other, decisions that go into how your sleeping arrangements for your family. So I want that to be a family decision. But whatever it is, be intentional about it, be specific, check in with your partner about, whether or not you guys are aligned in that. And if you're not, you really need to find ways to come together and make that decision in a mutual way. And then whatever you do, follow through with it consistently, because sleep is a vulnerable state for all of us to be in, and for our children they experience it most acutely and saliently. And you know when you're asleep, you're lying down, you're semi-conscious, you're vulnerable to potential threats from the environment in our evolutionary past, and our brains are hardwired to experience that. So it's really totally understandable that children want to be with a close other at night. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for your family. So I'm not advocating that everybody have a family bed either. I'm just saying I really understand, as a human being, this is a natural response children have. If you're a family that wants your child to sleep consistently on their own, you have to follow the practices of keeping them in their bed consistently. Because the other way to achieve a sense of safety and security is to have very consistent routines and rhythms. So if one night the child is sleeping with you because you got desperate and you just wanted to sleep, and the next night you want them back in their room, that's just not fair to the child, and it's not going to work and will prolong the agony of getting a child to sleep independently. So, my suggestion is make a family level decision, stick with it, and be consistent. And if you need help with that, to either sort of figure out, what strategy you're going to go with, and how to stick with it, then that's when seeking out support from a professional could be beneficial. But I think really parents really need to sort of check in, if you're co-parenting, what are our goals, and be explicit and intentional about it, and then follow through.
Such great advice, such practical advice. And Dr. Wendy Troxel's book, Sharing the Covers, I'm going to put the link to her book in the notes, and to the other places that you can connect with her. Brilliant work. And it's so impactful. The work that you're doing is just life-changing for people because it is just so fundamental to our whole being. And so on that note, where can people connect with you? Save people going to the notes if they don't need to. Where online can they find your work and follow you?
Oh, well, thanks so much. It's really been a pleasure to get to talk to you. Yeah, so I have a website, wendytroxel.com. I also have two TED Talks, one focused on relationships and sleep, the topic of today, one also focused on teenagers and sleep, and why teenagers are among the most chronically sleep deprived of all populations and why schools are not helping them. I also am on Twitter. Wendy Troxel is my Twitter handle. And on Instagram, it's Sharing the Covers, the title of my book.
Oh, fantastic. How did I miss those TED Talks? Oh my gosh, I'll have to go back and watch them because they that is brilliant, and I recommend anyone listening please connect with Dr. Wendy Troxel's work, because for those of us on parenting journeys, for those of us who we're all getting older and we have so many demands and so many stresses and so many devices and so many things that will influence our sleep. The more that we can learn, the more we can protect it, the better we can function, and the more rich and full and meaningful our lives. So your work is extraordinary, and as are you, and I'm very, very grateful for your time. So thank you for sharing some of it with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I'd be so fascinated to get some feedback from you on what you found most intriguing or interesting or inspiring or insightful from today's episode. There's so much new information here, and I'd really love to get that feedback from you. So jump on Instagram, come over to the post around this episode, let me know, and that will also give me some insights into what else we can explore in future episodes. So thanks everyone for joining us, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.